Welcome to Epilogue Podcast, the show where we discuss some stuff that happened on a different show ages ago which nobody really cares about anymore.
Hello, I'm Portponky.
And I'm LeBloc.
Today we're discussing Deep Space Nine, Season 5, Episode 16. Dr. Bashir, I presume. With no question mark on the title card. Bashir is chosen as the model for the new emergency medical hologram by Dr. Zimmerman, who in turn causes Bashir's parents to spill the beans on Bashir's genetic history. Oh, and Rom hooks up with Lita.
That guy who plays Dr. Zimmerman is great at being a jerk.
Robert Picardo. In a certain way, this episode might be a little baffling because the character of Dr. Zimmerman seems to be... Well, what do you think of him?
Yeah, he's a big jerk.
Well, I guess I should just say he's a main character on Star Trek Voyager. So,
okay. Didn't know that.
Yeah, there's a lot of Voyager references in this episode. Except Dr. Zimmerman is not actually the main character on Voyager, but the emergency medical hologram is the ship's doctor on Voyager.
Oh, okay.
So basically, it's a clever way to get a Voyager character to show up on Deep Space Nine. I don't know if any of that was apparent.
No, was there something in there I should have picked up on? I just thought of him as a one-off character played well.
There was a couple of in-jokes. Please state the nature of the medical emergency is his catchphrase. Well, the hologram's catchphrase.
I wasn't confused by anything, and it didn't feel like a subset of the audience was being pandered to while I sat there confused. I didn't feel any of that.
Well, that's good. I remember when Tuvok showed up in the Mirror Universe, it was a little confusing why this random guy is chummy with everyone for no apparent reason. So at least they didn't fall down that hole again. Okay, well, aside from that, this is the episodes where we find out that Bashir is harboring, that's not a word, a deep, dark secret.
He's a freak.
Yep, he is disgustingly altered by science into a monster, which no one could love.
Which should have prevented him from joining Starfleet for some reason.
Well, yeah, the eugenics wars, which happened in the 90s, you might remember them if you cast your mind back. The original series had a bit about this, and Wrath of Khan, the movie, or even Star Trek Into Darkness, if you like that kind of thing. Well, it takes all types to build a world. I say the eugenics wars are very memorable, but the Admiral didn't actually get the century right. He said 200 years ago rather than 300. So basically, they did a lot of eugenics and they built human Terminators who conquered a bunch of stuff and killed loads of people. And then they had a big war and said, let's stop it with the eugenics.
Fair enough, but Bashir was genetically enhanced against... It wasn't his choice, and he's proven to be an exceptional doctor, so I don't see why he wouldn't just be granted the ability to continue serving.
I don't think it's about whose choice it was. Oh wait, now I'm getting confused. Usually it wouldn't be the person's choice. They get enhanced when they were a kid or before they're born or whatever. I think. So I guess the rule would be because augments tend to be crazy. Power hungry.
he's proven not to be.
Yes, but it's a
well, he did stab that guy in the neck.
It's a blanket ban rather than a case-by-case thing, so if they set the precedent that certain augments are allowed, that's a spanner in the works. But then they do let him anyway, so I don't know.
They do make an exception for him.
In the original draft of the script, they weren't going to. They were going to get dirt on Zimmerman and end up with conflicting secrets and burying the whole thing. But Alexander Siddig said, no, don't do that. I don't want to play a guy that's got a secret all the time.
He technically did. He just didn't know it.
He didn't know it until 3 days before shooting this episode.
That's a reasonable request, though, because now he's informed, then he has to carry that with the character.
So aside from the whole eugenics thing, Bashir is now literally Superman.
It explains how he's a super genius at such a young age.
Well, it does fit with his character reasonably well, but there's no foreshadowing for this.
No, it's dropped into our lap out of nowhere.
And it kind of makes it clunky because they've sort of just rewritten him a bit.
It's not something they can really backpedal from either. They have to go with this. This is established now. He's a freak.
Well, we always knew he was a freak.
It was funny and sad at the same time when O'Brien said what he really thinks of Bashir, and it's all wonderful things, but he doesn't want Bashir to know.
I don't know exactly how sincere he was being, though. You could see in his eyes there were clauses to all of these things.
Oh, so you saw it as him trying to protect a friend, but then not wanting that friend to know how much he exaggerated?
I think he just didn't want Bashir to be too pumped up. His ego is quite substantial, and having basically his only real friend on the station say, yeah, this guy's all right, make Bashir inflate even further. They have a sort of relationship of putting each other down all the time.
And this would disrupt it and ruin it if it were to get out.
Yeah, they have to maintain a certain level of closeness and no more, and they use disparaging remarks to establish precisely how close they are as friends. But if you let these remarks out, that would break the boundary. He'd be getting far too close.
It would undo the fantasy.
We'd replace it with a whole new fantasy. But that's another story.
I was terribly distracted during this episode because the guy who plays no, the other storyline, Bashir's dad, played by Brian George. I am familiar with him through Seinfeld, where he played a Pakistani character with a stereotypical accent, and I thought that's how he talked. I feel terrible thinking that, but that's what I thought his voice was. And then to hear him speak in this episode was just blowing my mind. I had no idea that's what his real voice was, or what he could do with his voice, I guess.
I was unfamiliar with this actor. I will say the scenes between Bashir and his family were very well done. Proper angst and rage going on there. And Bashir's poor dad at the end, when he decides to go to prison, you could see his little heart breaking.
I like that they presented multiple angles with the genetic enhancements during the family scenes. So it's not all about we were disappointed in you as a son, so we did this. The mother says, hey, you don't have children. You don't know what it's like to see them struggle. And Bashir saying, you guys didn't give me a chance. I was only 6. So that was great how they had all these viewpoints in there. And it wasn't trying to beat me over the head with morality and saying, this is what should have been done.
His mother's little speech, that tugged the heartstrings. It's really strange because the first half, maybe, of this episode is kind of goofy.
Yeah, it is.
It lulls you into a false sense of security, then it has this fairly intense family drama thing. All this backstory rewriting. It's a weird episode.
It is, because we have the broadness of Rom working up the courage to ask out Lita, and then family drama and genetic modifications. It's a strange mix.
Okay, I'm going to say a few things about the Lita and Rom subplot. It is good that Lita likes Rom because they have a tendency on these shows to basically make everyone human sexual so that people who are most human-like are the most attractive. So it's good that Lita is not playing into that.
And it's good that they break that pattern with her, because she is this overly sexualized character. So to see her go after someone like Rom is great to see.
It's very nice, but I'm going to turn it right round and complain. Why why doesn't she just ask him out?
Yeah.
Why has it got to be the guy that pursues the lady? Yeah, well, it's fair enough that maybe she wouldn't, but then to just start fake almost dating someone else just to spite him almost?
Maybe she is typically the one to ask someone out and she's tired of it. She wants to be pursued. And even though Dr. Zimmerman is a big jerk who says he has a towering intellect, well, she goes for him. This is how I see it. Simply because he was forward and asked her, and that was attractive to her.
I don't know if she was that attracted to him or if she was just using him to get Nog to do... Not Nog? What am I talking about? She's just using him to get Rom to do stuff. We saw earlier on in... I can't remember the episode. We saw earlier on that she came on strong to Bashir. So it's in her nature to get flirty with the guys. But in this episode, no, she's the damsel that must be rescued by the guy.
I hope she wasn't just using Zimmerman to lure Rom. That would make me like Lita less.
Oh, he's probably a good backup. I mean, he's almost certainly minted. That doesn't reflect well my opinion of anyone. I'm sure her motives were completely noble, and we have no reason to assume one way or the other.
I'll give her the benefit of the doubt.
Zimmerman's a nice guy, anyway. Well, he's a guy.
Yes, I'll agree he's a guy.
He's the kind of guy that would date someone half his age, apparently. Here's something that I noticed that is absolutely irrelevant.
I'm intrigued.
Whenever people sit down for a meal, they all eat the same food.
In the future, it's considered polite to all order the same thing.
Okay.
So that way, when you divvy up leftovers, you could do it equally among all parties.
But leftovers wouldn't be a thing. They just unreplicate everything they don't eat. It's like a restaurant. They can just order whatever from the replicator.
But when it's from a restaurant, it's handmade because replicator food doesn't taste as good.
Well, what I mean is that the replicator is like a restaurant. You have to.
Oh,
They'd have to go up and say, okay, we're having lasagna. We're 6 people, so lasagna. Take that out, put it on the table. Go back, lasagna. Take that out, put it on the table. You know. Well, they get a big dish of it sometimes. It still seems. It's just one of these details where I don't think it would be like that. If you could instantly create any dish, I think people would just eat what they wanted to eat. The only reason people don't do that now is because it's a pain. Perhaps you have no strong feelings one way or the other.
Without eating the same dish, they can't talk about how they feel. No, this doesn't make any sense.
Well, if they've had it before from the replicator, they'll know exactly what it's like. It's the same every time.
But you don't know how you would feel about it in that moment, that exact moment.
Yeah, you probably do.
Yeah, I probably do.
Okay.
I have a minor complaint, but it's something I wouldn't blame the writers. I think it's something they are kind of forced to do because of the format. So before the first commercial break, I think it's the first one, Bashir says, "Don't contact my parents," or whatever. And then Zimmerman is writing in his notepad and says aloud, "Contact subject's parents immediately," and then commercial break. So they do that to hook you so you stay with the show, but it's so clunky. Obviously, he's going to do it because we know what kind of character he is. And even if he didn't say anything, he could sell it with his face. Or even if he didn't show that, his parents show up later anyway. And then that's when you know, oh, he went ahead and did it. So it comes off as clunky. And I wanted to say it was a lack of trust in the audience, but it's not that. It's the format. And it doesn't play well now as a person watching this episode free of commercials. It's just silly. And I wish it weren't there, but I could see why it is.
Doesn't he jot it down whilst also saying it?
Yes, something no one ever does in real life.
They didn't even make him dictate it into a thing. Because
Yeah.
that at least would have made sense.
Oh, yeah, that would have been better. But no, he's writing it and says it aloud.
Even with the dictaphone, it would have been silly. He doesn't need to remind himself of that.
No,
It's
and
key
we would
part
see
of
it
the
later.
project.
It's
Yeah.
just a hook to keep us watching so we don't bail on the first commercial.
It's a weak hook, though. You could just make him have an expression on his face.
Oh, totally. He could sell it with his face. But, yeah.
It's not as bad as when shows go to a break and come back at the same scene. When you watch stuff without commercials, that always breaks the immersion.
Oh, so when someone pulls out a gun and points it at someone, then cuts commercial break, and then we come back, and then it's the same. They draw it out again.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. Yeah.
Oh no, another gun.
Where'd you get that second one?
It was really difficult disarming you during that short interlude.
I understand why they do that, or why they did that. It's not as prevalent now, but it's annoying returning to this stuff.
In the future, it won't be like this. I guess the number of shows that have commercial break hooks is dwindling, maybe?
It's not as relevant of a model. A lot of stuff is just dumped onto streaming services now. They don't conform to typical episode lengths rigidly. So it's all evolving. We're all in the middle of that.
I guess in 50 years or something, these little commercial break hooks and fades into the same scene will be as silly to viewers as, for example, the title cards in silent movies seem to us now.
Or how people fake drive in really old movies. Constantly moving the wheel.
It's just a thing of the 90s and 2000s and 80s and 70s, etc. We saw the return of the holotransmitter.
Yes, we did.
It's clinging on for dear life.
I hope it dies a swift death.
But why? It's so clunky, and they've, in this episode, gave it an overhead light to make it seem really different. And they used a massive panning shot to show it was 3D. Which still doesn't work because it's obviously just the actor standing there. You're not convincing us that it's special technology.
Right.
Do you think we'll see the holotransmitter again?
Yeah, I think we'll see it one more time and then never again. They've already shown view screens. I don't know what the technical term.
View screen is the technical term.
Okay, there we go. We saw Ducat giving his speech through a view screen, and that was awesomely effective. So they don't need to do this stuff with the holograms.
The episode where Eddington first joins the Maquis has a slow pan in on a view screen of him with a recorded message. It was way better than the holotransmitter stuff. Well, we don't need to rag on the holotransmitter. It's obviously terrible.
Yes. Let's talk about good stuff. I enjoyed Ram adjusting his lobes for super hearing in order to eavesdrop.
There was just one thing with that. It does look like he's fumbling his ears for giggle fun. Just for a moment, because that's what they do. Those
Right.
disgusting Ferengi. It does look like he's just having a little public twiddle, and then it becomes apparent he's using advanced hearing, which is awesome. They've been doing a lot of Ferengi hearing stuff recently.
They finally realized they have giant ears.
Remember the script writers had never actually seen the Ferengi. That doesn't make sense. They mention their ears all the time, but now they actually have thought, oh, if they're huge, maybe they work better.
And they've shown amazing restraint with the Ferengi. I don't think we've mentioned this, how much better written they are now compared to how they used to be. There were constant references to stuff I didn't want to hear about with the Ferengi, and we don't get that at all, really, now.
There's a good example in this episode. Quark is being casually sexist, saying that Lita should basically get her chest back to the customers. But he just comes off as sexist and doesn't skeg out the audience. Well, I mean, other than how much sexism is normally disgusting, but he doesn't. He's not like tricking people into
Ugh.
or like violating people's consent in weird ways. There's a line between just being a sexist jerk and being a sort of sex offender. It's an important distinction, and playing one side in jest is very different from playing the other side in jest.
And thank goodness they caught on, and we're seeing the results of that.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, for the time being, for a pretty long stretch of time.
Yeah, we're rolling in the good times.
Yeah, okay.
But generally, they are a lot better at it. I think it's time to discuss a genetically enhanced quote from the show.
You're not a fraud. I don't care how many enhancements your parents had done. Genetic recoding can't give you ambition or personality or compassion or any of the things that make a person truly human.
And if you like this quote, you should watch the film Gattaca.
That movie is in my pile of shame. One of those movies I wanted to see for a very long time and still haven't gotten around to it.
You should watch it. Like, right now.
All right, let's end this podcast so I can go watch it.
Okay, we should. And that's a good quote, by the way. I like it. The end.